r/pettyrevenge, false cheating accusations. I let her catch us together. Hashtag chunk 1, the breaking point. My phone buzzed for the third time in 5 minutes. Where are you? Don't lie to me. I know you're with her. I stared at the messages while sitting in the library, exactly where I told her I'd be. Sarah sat across from me at our usual study table, pretending not to notice my jaw clenching as I read. We were supposed to be studying for our organic chemistry midterm, highlighting notes and comparing practice problems like we'd done every Tuesday and Thursday for the past semester. She's doing it again, Sarah whispered, not looking up from her textbook. Yeah, I muttered, typing out a response I'd typed out 100 times before, asterisk I'm at the library. Same place I told you. Check the sign-in sheet if you want, asterisk. The reply came almost instantly. You're always at the library. It's where you hide. I'm coming to check. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This was my life now. This was what 2 years with Jessica had become. 24 years old, and I was living like a prisoner who had to justify every minute of his day to a jailer who didn't trust him. Every class, every study session, every time I met with my study group, it was treated like a potential crime scene. And the worst part? I'd never given her a reason not to trust me. She's coming here, I said quietly to Sarah, who finally looked up. Again. Sarah's face darkened with genuine concern. She'd witnessed at least 3 of Jessica's impromptu inspections of my whereabouts over the past few months. The last one had been a real spectacle, Jessica showing up at the gym, scanning the entire facility with laser focus until she found me on the treadmill, then loudly interrogating me about why I hadn't answered my phone immediately. As if being mid-workout was somehow the perfect time to respond to texts. Yeah. She's convinced we're. I gestured vaguely between Sarah and me. Sarah's expression shifted into something harder. She was a good person, genuinely kind, and watching my girlfriend's paranoia and accusations where on both of us had been taking a toll. I could see it in the way she'd started to become uncomfortable even being around me, not because of anything I'd done, but because of the toxic environment Jessica created whenever she showed up. This is insane, man, Sarah said, shaking her head. You know that, right? This isn't normal. I know. And I did know. Everyone knew. My roommate had finally stopped trying to be diplomatic about it 2 months ago and just started saying, dude, she's crazy. You gotta leave. My mom had concerns she voiced carefully. Even my closest friends had started declining invitations that involved Jessica, because her dramatic accusations and public meltdowns had become the main event at any gathering. The thing was, and this was what made it all so infuriating, I'd never cheated. Not once. I hadn't even looked at another girl in a way that could be misconstrued. I'd given Jessica my passwords, my location history, access to my phone whenever she wanted it. I'd been as transparent as humanly possible, and it still wasn't enough. It had started small. About 6 months into the relationship, she'd asked me to check in more often. Then she wanted to know where I was and who I was with. The requests became demands. The checking in became mandatory. The questions about my whereabouts became interrogations. And somewhere along the way, instead of becoming more secure with all my honesty and transparency, she'd become more paranoid. By the time we hit the 1-year mark, I was basically on an electronic leash. She tracked my location. She'd show up unannounced at places I told her I'd be. She'd accuse me of affairs, of flirting, of cheating, with my lab partner, with a barista at my coffee shop, with literally anyone who had a vagina and had made eye contact with me. The accusations had gotten worse in the past few months. More aggressive. More public. Last week, she tracked me to campus and confronted me outside my economics lecture, loudly accusing me of using class as a cover to meet up with someone from my high school who apparently lived on campus too, a girl I'd literally never seen before and didn't know. Students had stopped to stare. I'd been so mortified I'd almost skipped the lecture. And now it was Sarah. Her name had been coming up for weeks. The accusation had gotten more specific, more detailed, more certain. Jessica had started saying things like, I can just tell she likes you, and I've seen the way you look at her, and don't insult my intelligence by denying it. None of it was true, but the truth didn't matter anymore. My phone buzzed again. I'm here. I'm coming in. And if I find you two together, we're done. I almost laughed. We'd been done in my head for weeks now. But there was something about seeing it written out, that ultimatum, that crystallized something in my chest. A moment of absolute clarity. I was tired of defending myself. I was tired of being investigated. I was tired of my innocence meaning absolutely nothing against her accusations. And I was particularly tired of being punished for crimes I hadn't committed while the real problem, her insecurity and need for control, went completely unaddressed. I looked up at Sarah, whose eyes were wide with apprehension. What if, I said slowly, the idea forming even as I spoke it, we actually gave her what she's been looking for? What do you mean? Sarah asked, but I could see she was already understanding where my head was going. What if we let her catch us? Not actually doing anything, but staged. She's been looking for proof that doesn't exist. What if we gave her exactly what she's desperately searching for? Sarah stared at me for a long moment. That's insane. I finished. Yeah. But so is this. So is being accused of cheating when I've literally done nothing wrong. The doors to the library entrance were visible from where we sat. Jessica was probably walking through them right now, ready to validate her paranoia with some kind of evidence of my infidelity. I'm listening, Sarah said quietly. Hashtag chunk 2, the plan takes shape. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. You're talking about actually staging something. Like, making it look. Like we're together, I finished. Yeah. But completely staged. Nothing real happens. We just give her the visual she's been hunting for. I could see the conflict playing out on Sarah's face in real time. Part of her wanted to dismiss the idea as ridiculous, which it was. But another part of her, the part that had watched Jessica's behavior escalate over months, was considering it seriously. Why would you even want to do that? Sarah asked. That's just going to confirm her worst fears. No, it won't, I said, and as I spoke, the logic crystallized further in my mind. Because I'm going to record it. I'm going to film her reaction, the accusation, the meltdown, all of it, and then I'm going to show her exactly what happened. The truth. That we staged the whole thing because I'm tired of being investigated for crimes I didn't commit. Sarah's eyes widened. That's actually kind of brilliant. But also kind of fucked up. She's been kind of fucked up, I countered. I've been patient. I've been honest. I've given her everything she asked for, transparency, access, explanations for every minute of my day. And it hasn't helped. She's only gotten worse. So maybe the only way to break this cycle is to show her exactly how ridiculous her accusations have become. But staging cheating. Sarah trailed off, glancing toward the library in trance. That's not exactly ethical either. I knew she was right. I wasn't under any illusions about this plan being morally clean. But I was also at a point where my own mental health was deteriorating under the constant accusation and surveillance. I'd started having anxiety attacks before checking my phone. I'd become withdrawn around friends. I was losing sleep over arguments about things I hadn't done. The toxic cycle had to break somehow. She's already decided I'm cheating, I said quietly. Nothing I say or do changes that. So what if we show her the truth in a way that actually makes her understand how her paranoia has warped everything? Sarah was quiet for a moment, and I could see her weighing it. Finally, she asked the practical question, how would we even do this? She's going to be looking for actual proof. If she just sees us talking or sitting close, that won't convince her of anything. She needs to see something more intimate. I hadn't thought that far ahead yet, but Sarah was right. Jessica wouldn't accept anything ambiguous. She'd find a way to explain it away or demand more proof of her accusations. We could stage it in a compromising position, I said slowly. Nothing actually happens, but visually, we make it look like something was interrupted. Like she caught us in the act. Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly. You mean like, on a couch? Making out? Not actually making out, I clarified quickly. But it would look that way if she walked in. We'd be positioned like it, but it's staged. The moment she appears and starts recording or accusing, we stand up and explain exactly what's happening. And you're going to be recording the whole time she's reacting, Sarah said, working through the scenario. Yeah. I want documentation of her behavior. When I break up with her, and I am breaking up with her after this, I want proof of what I've been dealing with. The accusations, the tracking, the surveillance, the public humiliation. Everything. Because if I'm going to end this, I need to do it in a way where she can't twist the narrative afterward. Sarah rubbed her temples. This is insane. I mean, genuinely, this is one of the most insane plans I've heard in a while. I know. But also. She looked at me directly. I've watched her show up here and humiliate you at least 3 times. I've seen her track you down at the gym, at classes, at places where she had no reason to be. I've watched you become a shadow of yourself trying to prove your innocence to someone who's already made up her mind that you're guilty. So I get why you want to do this. Relief washed through me, even though she hadn't said yes yet. So you'll help? I asked. Sarah glanced around the library, at the scattered students studying, at the librarians behind the desk, at the quiet Wednesday afternoon energy that probably wouldn't last much longer once Jessica arrived. We'd need somewhere more private than here, she said. If we're staging something, we can't do it in the middle of the library. Too many witnesses, and it gets messy. She was already thinking through logistics, which felt like a yes. My apartment, I said. My roommate's at work until 6. We could do it there. It's only about 10 minutes away. And you're going to text her the address and tell her to come over? Yeah. I'll make it seem casual. Make her think she'll catch me there. I was already composing the message in my head. Something that would be irresistible to her paranoia, that would bring her running. Sarah was still processing, her fingers drumming against the study table. If this goes wrong, like, if she doesn't believe the explanation, if she posts about it online, if she tells people you actually cheated. It won't matter, I said. Because I'll have the recording. I'll have proof that we staged it, proof of why I staged it, and proof of her reaction. And honestly, at that point, I don't care what she tells people. I'm done. And that was the truth that crystallized everything. I was done. Maybe not entirely, I still had to get through the actual breakup, but mentally, emotionally, I'd already checked out. The person I'd loved 2 years ago, the girl Jessica had been before the paranoia consumed her, was long gone. What I had now was an accuser, a jailer, a person who decided I was guilty and built an entire relationship around punishing me for crimes I didn't commit. Okay, Sarah said finally. Okay, I'll help. But we do this right. We make sure everything is documented, everything is clear. And the moment she arrives and starts accusing, we explain immediately. Agreed. Sarah glanced at her watch. So are you going to text her now? I was already pulling out my phone. My hands felt steady, which surprised me. I thought I'd feel more nervous, more guilty about the deception. But all I felt was a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in months, I was taking action instead of just defending myself. I typed out the message carefully, *, I'm heading back to my place if you want to talk. Need to clear some things up about Sarah, *. I watched the 3 dots appear immediately, then disappear, then reappear. She's probably already grabbing her keys, Sarah murmured, watching my face. I hit send. #chunk3, the setup. The message sent. Within seconds, the 3 dots appeared again, Jessica typing, stopping, typing again. I watched the phone screen like it might detonate. * on my way. We need to talk about this, *. Of course she was on her way. Of course she'd drop everything the moment I dangled the bait in front of her paranoia. That was how this had become so predictable. She trained herself to respond to any hint of my whereabouts or activities with immediate action, as if hesitation might mean missing the moment she caught me doing something wrong. She's coming, I said unnecessarily, showing Sarah the screen. Sarah's face had gone pale. The reality of what we were about to do was clearly hitting her now that it had moved from theoretical to imminent. Okay. Okay, we need to actually plan this out. Like, step by step. Because if we mess up the timing, if she suspects anything before you can get the recording going. The recording will be set up before she arrives, I said. I'll use my laptop. Put it on the nightstand in my bedroom, position it so it captures the bed and most of the room. We'll hear her come in, we'll have a few seconds of warning before she makes it to the bedroom. Sarah was already standing, gathering her things. We should go now. We need time to set up, to get the angles right, to make sure the audio actually picks everything up. If this is going to work, if you're going to have actual evidence of what's happening, it has to be perfect. I nodded, shoving my laptop and textbooks into my backpack. My heart was starting to hammer now, the reality catching up with me. This was actually happening. I was about to orchestrate an elaborate deception to trap my girlfriend into proving my point about how paranoid and toxic she'd become. It sounded insane when I thought about it that way. Hey, Sarah said, touching my arm as we stood to leave. Are you sure about this? Because we can still back out. We can just not do it. I looked at her worried expression, at the conflict in her eyes. She was a good person, and I was about to drag her into something that felt increasingly complicated and ethically murky the more I thought about it. I'm sure, I said, and I was. Not because it was right or clean or uncomplicated, but because I was out of options. Reasoning hadn't worked. Transparency hadn't worked. Patience hadn't worked. The only currency Jessica seemed to accept anymore was proof. Proof of where I was, proof of what I was doing, proof that I wasn't betraying her. Well, I was going to give her proof. Just not the proof she expected. We left the library separately, Sarah heading out first while I waited 5 minutes before following. The late afternoon sun was harsh, cutting between the campus buildings as I made my way to the parking lot. My apartment was only 10 minutes away, but it might as well have been across town given how my stomach was churning. The drive gave me too much time to think. What if Sarah got cold feet once we were there? What if Jessica didn't fall for it? What if she arrived faster than expected and caught us in the middle of setting up, so she could see we were staging something? What if the recording didn't work? What if she somehow found out about the recording and I looked like the paranoid, controlling one for secretly filming her? I pulled into my apartment complex and found Sarah waiting by her car in the parking lot, her arms crossed, her expression anxious. When she saw me, she jogged over. I've been thinking, she said without preamble. About what happens after. Like, after you break up with her. She's going to be devastated. And angry. And she's going to tell people what she thinks happened, that you two actually cheated. The recording might prove you staged it, but it doesn't necessarily prove your innocence in her mind, you know? Some people, once they're hurt like that, they're just going to believe what they want to believe. I know, I said, climbing the stairs to my apartment. But at least I'll have the evidence. At least I'll know the truth, and anyone who matters in my life will know the truth. What about your friends who only hear her side of the story? Then they're not really my friends. Sarah fell quiet as I unlocked the door and we stepped inside. My roommate's shoes were gone from the entryway, confirming he was still at work. The apartment was in its usual state of controlled chaos, dishes in a sink from this morning, a few textbooks on the coffee table, the general clutter of two college guys who cleaned sporadically and with minimal enthusiasm. Okay, Sarah said, moving into problem-solving mode. So your bedroom is? Down the hall, second door on the left. We walked through the apartment quickly. My room was smaller than I'd like, dominated by my bed, a desk with a monitor, a dresser that didn't quite fit properly against the wall. The closet door was perpetually half open, spilling a few jackets and hangers. This is. Sarah paused, looking around. This is actually perfect, in a weird way. It looks lived in, normal. She won't think anything is off just from the appearance of the room. I was already pulling out my laptop, setting it on the nightstand. I opened the camera app and checked the angle. From where I positioned it, the laptop would capture the bed clearly and most of the room, including the doorway. Audio, Sarah said. How loud is the doorbell? Will we hear it in here? Pretty loud. And the apartment's small enough that we'll hear her anyway when she comes in. Sarah moved to the bed, then stopped. So, how do we actually position ourselves? Like, what makes sense? What would make it look like? She trailed off, and I could see the embarrassment creeping up her neck. She was a sweet person, genuinely nice, and I was asking her to stage a compromising position with me in front of my girlfriend. The ethical wrongness of that kept hitting me in waves. We could be on the bed, I said quietly. Just, not doing anything. Your back against the headboard, me leaning toward you. It would look like we were in the middle of making out or heading in that direction if she opened the door. The visual is what matters. Sarah nodded slowly, moving to the bed. I set the laptop to start recording, watching the timestamp begin in the corner of the screen. I had maybe 20 minutes, maybe less. Jessica's place was closer than mine to campus. Come here, Sarah said, her voice soft. She was already positioned against the headboard, trying to look casual despite the awkwardness of the moment. I moved to the bed, sitting next to her, acutely aware of how this would look to anyone watching the recording. I was about to commit to this. I was about to become the architect of my own accusation. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, not wanting to, already knowing what it would say. Asterisk just pulling up to your place. Is Sarah there? Asterisk. Of course she was asking if Sarah was here. She'd been tracking Sarah in her mind for weeks, months, building a narrative around us. This message confirmed she was already outside, already preparing her confrontation. She's here, I told Sarah, showing her the screen. Sarah's eyes went wide. Oh my god. She's already here. We don't have time to. It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. Just, be ready. I heard the front door open downstairs. Jessica was inside the apartment. Hashtag chunk 4. The sound of the door closing downstairs sent a spike of adrenaline through my chest. I could hear her footsteps in the entryway, the characteristic way she dropped her keys on the table with a little more force than necessary. She was angry. Already angry, and she hadn't even found us yet. Upstairs. Sarah whispered, her eyes locked on mine. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. The recording was running. The laptop on the nightstand captured us in its cool, dispassionate lens. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for days was actually happening, and now that it was here, all I felt was a strange hollow sensation in my chest, like I was watching someone else make these decisions. Hey. Jessica's voice carried up the stairwell, sharp and accusatory. I know you're here. Your car is outside. Sarah's hand found mine. Her palm was clammy, her grip tight. I realized she was terrified. Not of Jessica exactly, but of what came next, of the scene that was about to unfold, of being part of this manufactured moment that would detonate my relationship. I squeezed her hand once and released it. Footsteps on the stairs now. Heavy, deliberate. She wasn't trying to sneak up on us. She was announcing herself, giving us time to scramble, to be caught in the act of scrambling. I understood then that some part of Jessica, the part that had been building this narrative in her head for months, actually wanted to catch us. She wanted to be right. She wanted the vindication of her suspicions confirmed. I'm coming in, she announced, as if we might stop her, as if this were any kind of warning. Sarah's body went rigid next to me. I could feel the tremor in her shoulders, the way she was forcing herself to breathe normally. We hadn't rehearsed what to do in these final seconds. We hadn't practiced looking guilty or surprised or caught off guard. I realized now that was a mistake. We should have planned this better. We should have thought through every detail instead of rushing into it the moment the possibility arose. The hallway light spilled under my bedroom door. I heard her pause there, hand on the doorknob. Everything in me wanted to stop this. To jump up, to explain, to say it was all a setup before she saw anything that would cement this in her mind. But that would ruin everything. That would be proof that we were faking it, and what then? She'd know I'd orchestrated all of this. She'd be angrier than ever. She'd use it as evidence of how manipulative and controlling I was. The narrative would flip entirely. So I sat still. Waited. Let the moment arrive. Jessica opened the door. For a second, maybe two, there was absolute silence. The kind of silence that felt like the world holding its breath. I could see her in my peripheral vision, her face going pale, then flushing red, her hand dropping from the doorknob like it had burned her. Oh my God, she whispered. Then, louder, oh my God. Sarah made a small noise next to me, not quite a gasp, but close. I kept my eyes forward, not meeting Jessica's stare, because if I did, if I let myself look at her face, I might lose my nerve completely. I might crack under the weight of what I'd just done. You, Jessica's voice cracked. I knew it. I fucking knew it. She didn't sound vindicated the way I'd expected. She sounded devastated. Absolutely broken. And that hit differently than anticipated, struck at something in me that had been insulated by months of her accusations and surveillance and control. Because yes, she'd been toxic. Yes, she'd driven me insane with her paranoia. But she was still a person, and I was still deliberately hurting her. Jessica, I started. Don't. She held up a hand, her eyes glistening. Don't you dare. Don't you fucking dare try to explain this to me. You need to listen. I trusted you. Her voice was smaller now, stripped of its usual defensive anger. I trusted you even when every instinct I had was telling me something was wrong. I gave you chances. I asked you directly and you lied to my face. My stomach twisted. The recording was capturing all of this. Every word, every emotion, every ounce of pain I was inflicting. This wasn't the scene I'd envisioned. I'd imagined her rage, her accusations, her dramatic meltdown that would feel justified because she'd spent months being unjustifiably paranoid. I'd imagined her angry enough that my conscience could stay quiet. But this quiet devastation was something else entirely. You need to know, I tried again. I need to know what? That you couldn't even wait until you broke up with me to sleep with her. That you let me waste 2 years of my life on someone who was lying to me this entire time. Jessica's eyes moved to Sarah, and Sarah actually flinched under the weight of that stare. And you. You knew. You knew I was worried about this specifically, and you. It's not what you think, Sarah said quietly. Jessica laughed, a brittle, broken sound. Oh, that's rich. That's absolutely fucking rich. It's not what I think. What am I thinking, Sarah? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think. I realized with a sickening clarity that I'd made a catastrophic error in my planning. I'd focused so entirely on getting her to the apartment, on getting the recording, that I hadn't actually thought through what would happen after she saw us. I hadn't accounted for the fact that seeing us on the bed would be so fundamentally damaging that no amount of explanation afterward would matter. Even if I showed her the recording. Even if I proved we hadn't actually done anything. Even if I explained the entire setup to justify my reasons for doing it, she would still remember this moment. She would still remember opening that door and seeing us together like that. The damage would be done, regardless of what came next. I want you to leave, Jessica said flatly, looking at me. And I want your stuff out of my apartment by tomorrow. I'll text you when I'm not home. Jessica, wait. No. She turned toward the door. No more explanations. No more lies. We're done. She closed the door quietly behind her, and I heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway. Then the stairs. Then the front door opening and closing with a final, definitive click. Sarah looked at me, her face pale. Did that work the way you wanted? I realized I was shaking. No, I said quietly. No, it didn't. Chunk 5. For what felt like an eternity, neither Sarah nor I moved. We were still positioned on the bed exactly as we'd been when Jessica opened the door, and there was something grotesquely absurd about remaining frozen in our staged scene now that the audience had left. The laptop was still recording. I could hear the soft whir of the fan, the ambient hum of the device capturing nothing but an empty room and two people who just royally fucked everything up. We should turn that off, Sarah said finally, her voice hollow. I reached over and closed the laptop without looking at the screen. I didn't want to see what we looked like in that moment. Didn't want to confront the visual record of my own spectacular miscalculation. I can't believe she left like that, Sarah continued, wrapping her arms around herself. I thought she'd. I don't know, I thought there'd be more yelling. More of a scene. Wasn't that the whole point? To give you something to show people, proof that she was unhinged. Yeah, I said. That was the point. But she wasn't unhinged in that moment. That was the problem. When Jessica saw us on the bed, something in her shifted. All the paranoia, all the accusations, all the obsessive behavior that had made the past months so unbearable, it suddenly looked like it had been justified. She wasn't a controlling, paranoid girlfriend proven wrong. She was a woman whose instincts had been telling her the truth all along, and she'd chosen to ignore them until it was too late. What are you going to do? Sarah asked. I stood up, needing to move, needing to do something with my hands before I went completely insane. I don't know. You have the recording. You can still explain everything. Show her that we didn't actually. And what? Tell her I deliberately staged this entire thing to prove she was crazy. That I let her find us in a compromising position just so I'd have video evidence of her reaction. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's not going to look good, Sarah. That's not going to vindicate me. That's going to make me look like the villain. Sarah flinched at my tone. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think of solutions here. I know. I know you are. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to breathe through the mounting panic. I miscalculated. Badly. The thing I hadn't accounted for was that Jessica's pain would feel real to me. That watching her face crumble wouldn't feel like justice or satisfaction or vindication. It would feel like I'd deliberately broken something that couldn't be put back together again. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica, *, don't come back to the apartment tonight. I need space, *. Then another, almost immediately, *, and don't contact me. I can't deal with this right now, *. I stared at the messages, waiting for my relief to kick in. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? A clean break, an exit from a toxic relationship, evidence that she'd been the problem all along. But all I felt was a queasy sense of dread. She's not going to listen to any explanation, I said, more to myself than Sarah. Even if I show her the recording, even if I walk through every detail of how this was all staged, she's going to remember the moment she opened that door. She's going to remember seeing us together like that, and nothing I say afterward is going to change what she felt in that moment. Maybe that's okay, Sarah offered hesitantly. Maybe she needed to feel that. To actually understand what she's been doing to you for months. By doing the exact same thing to her that she's been doing to me. By using deception and manipulation to prove that she's been deceitful and manipulative. I shook my head. That's not justice, Sarah. That's just revenge. And I'm starting to realize those aren't the same thing at all. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hi, is this, a woman's voice, unfamiliar? Is this the boyfriend? Who is this? This is Officer Chen with the police department. I'm calling regarding a report filed by Jessica Martinez. She's requesting a wellness check at your residence, Anne. The phone felt suddenly very heavy in my hand. A wellness check. Why? She expressed concern that you might be a danger to yourself or others. Can you confirm that you're currently safe? I heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath beside me. I couldn't look at her. I'm fine, I said carefully. I'm completely fine. There's no reason for a wellness check. That's good to hear. Still, we'll need to send an officer to verify. It'll just take a few minutes. After I hung up, I couldn't move for a solid minute. Sarah was staring at me with her eyes wide. She called the cops on you, she whispered. Not on me. For me. She's worried I'm suicidal or something. But why would she? Sarah stopped, understanding dawning on her face. Oh. Oh no. She thinks you've completely lost it. She thinks you're so unstable that you're manufacturing evidence of her paranoia. Exactly. I went to the window and looked down at the street. Sure enough, a police car was pulling up to the curb. 2 officers were getting out, looking up at the building with the practiced patience of people who did this several times a week. This is bad, I said. This is really fucking bad. You can still explain, Sarah said, though even she didn't sound convinced anymore. You can show them the recording, tell them it was all a setup, that you were just trying to. Trying to what? Trick my girlfriend into thinking I was cheating so I could prove she was paranoid. That's not going to sound sane, Sarah. That's going to sound like exactly the kind of thing an unstable person would do. There was a knock at the apartment door downstairs. Insistent, authoritative. How did they even get inside? Sarah asked. The landlord probably let them in. I looked at the laptop sitting closed on the nightstand. The recording of our staged scene was inside it, along with weeks of text messages from Jessica documenting her paranoia and accusations. Evidence that should have protected me. Instead, it suddenly felt like the recordings of a psychopath carefully documenting his manipulation of his girlfriend. Another knock, louder this time. They were coming up the stairs. We should go down, I said. We should meet them at the door and explain. But as I said it, I realized there was no explanation that would make this look good. Either I was a victim of an obsessively paranoid girlfriend, or I was a manipulative guy who staged a fake affair and then called the cops to prove she was unstable. Those were the only 2 narratives available to me now, and I just spent the last hour guaranteeing that nobody would ever believe the first one again. The footsteps reached the 2nd floor. They were almost at my door. #chunk 6. The knock came 3 times, sharp and official. I took a breath, trying to arrange my face into something that looked like a normal person who hadn't just orchestrated the most catastrophic mistake of his life. Coming, I called out, and Sarah immediately started pulling on her clothes. We caught each other's eyes for a brief moment, a look of mutual dread that confirmed we were both thinking the same thing. This was about to get so much worse. I opened the door to find two officers, a man and a woman, both with that particular blend of concern and skepticism that suggested they'd already made some preliminary judgments about the situation. The male officer was older, maybe mid-50s, with the kind of tired eyes that came from years of responding to domestic situations that were never as simple as the initial call suggested. "Are you David Mitchell?" the female officer asked. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Officer Chen and this is Officer Rodriguez. We received a call from Jessica Martinez expressing concern about your well-being. Can we come inside?" I stepped back, gesturing them in. Sarah was now fully dressed and standing awkwardly in the bedroom doorway, looking like she'd been caught doing exactly what we'd actually been caught doing, except we hadn't actually been doing it, which somehow made the whole thing feel more incriminating. "Everything's fine," I said, and heard immediately how defensive it sounded. "There's been a misunderstanding." Officer Chen's eyes swept across the bedroom, the unmade bed, the laptop on the nightstand, Sarah standing there with slightly mussed hair despite her now proper clothing. I could see her cataloging details, building her own narrative. "Is this Sarah?" Officer Chen asked, not unkindly. "Yes," Sarah said quickly. "But we haven't." She stopped, clearly realizing that any explanation was going to sound worse than silence. "Maybe we should all sit down," Officer Rodriguez suggested, and it wasn't really a suggestion. We moved to the living room. Sarah perched on one end of the couch, I sat on the other, and the officers took the chairs across from us, settling in with the body language of people prepared to be here for a while. "Jessica called approximately 20 minutes ago," Officer Chen began, consulting her phone. "She stated that she'd just discovered evidence of infidelity and was concerned about your mental stability. Specifically, she mentioned that you've been acting increasingly erratic and that she was worried you might harm yourself or others." "I'm not going to harm myself or anyone else," I said carefully. "Jessica and I have been having relationship problems. She has some trust issues that have made things difficult. But I'm not a danger to anyone." "What kind of trust issues?" Officer Rodriguez asked. I glanced at Sarah, then back at the officers. How was I supposed to explain this without sounding insane? How could I possibly describe the past 2 months of accusations and tracking and public humiliation without coming across as either the victim of an unstable person or someone manufacturing a sob story? "She's been convinced that I'm cheating," I said finally. "Despite the fact that I haven't been. She checks my phone, tracks my location, shows up at places unannounced. Tonight she came by unexpectedly and found Sarah and me together, and she's upset." "Understandable," Officer Chen said, not unkindly. "Sarah, are you in a relationship with David?" "No," Sarah said immediately. "No, we're not. We're study partners. David and I study together regularly. That's it. There's nothing romantic happening." "Then why were you in the bedroom?" Officer Rodriguez asked. I opened my mouth and closed it. "Because we were staging a fake affair to manipulate his girlfriend into revealing her true nature. Because I wanted documented evidence of her paranoia. Because I was an idiot who thought he could control a situation he'd completely failed to predict." "We were about to," I started, but Sarah cut me off. "He invited me to see his new laptop setup," she said. "We were just sitting on the bed looking at the screen." It was the worst possible lie, delivered with all the conviction of someone describing paint drying. Officer Chen raised an eyebrow slightly, the only indication that she found this explanation lacking. "Has Jessica made threats against you?" Officer Chen asked. "Has she displayed any violent behavior?" "No," I said. "She's not violent. She's struggling with anxiety and trust issues. But this isn't an emergency. This is a relationship problem, not a police matter. We'll let you be the judge of that," Officer Rodriguez said. "Has Jessica been physically aggressive toward you? Threatening in any way?" "No." "Has she mentioned harming herself?" I thought about Jessica's face when she opened the door. The way something inside her had seemed to shatter. "No. But she sounded upset when she texted me." Officer Chen exchanged a look with Officer Rodriguez. "Jessica did mention that she's been questioning her own judgment lately. That she's been worried she might be losing her grip on reality. She seemed genuinely distressed about that possibility." My stomach turned. Of course she had. Of course Jessica had taken the one moment of validation she'd found in months, the moment she'd actually been right about something, and convinced herself that it meant everything else had been right too. Except now, with the police at my door asking gentle questions and looking at me with clinical concern, it was starting to feel like maybe she'd been right about something else as well, that I was capable of something fundamentally fucked up. "I think the best thing for everyone would be to have a conversation when everyone's calmer," Officer Chen said. "Is that something you'd be willing to do?" "Yeah," I said. "Of course. And Sarah, are you safe here? Is there anywhere else you can go tonight?" Sarah nodded immediately. "I'll go home. I'll leave right now." After the officers left, satisfied that there were no immediate safety concerns, but clearly not fully convinced by any of our explanations, Sarah grabbed her bag and headed for the door without looking back. I didn't blame her. We'd both been so careful in our planning, so confident in the logic of our scheme, that we'd somehow managed to orchestrate the exact opposite of what we'd intended. I was alone now, in my apartment, with a closed laptop containing video evidence of a staged affair, text messages that suddenly looked less like documentation of paranoia and more like a concerned girlfriend trying to protect herself, and a wellness check that would probably appear in Jessica's records as evidence that I was the unstable one. I'd wanted her to understand how it felt to be constantly accused. Instead, I'd just given her the one piece of evidence she needed to believe she'd been right all along. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, *, "Is everything okay? This is Jessica's mom. She's not answering her phone, *. #chunk7. I stared at the text for a full 30 seconds before my brain fully processed what I was reading. Jessica's mom. Of course. Of course she'd called her mom. And of course her mom was now texting me because Jessica wasn't answering her phone, which meant Jessica was either ignoring calls or she was somewhere she couldn't answer them, which in the context of a wellness check and a shattered girlfriend was not a scenario I wanted to contemplate. I typed back, *Hi Mrs. Martinez. Jessica and I just had a disagreement. She's probably just taking some space. I'm sure she's fine, *. Three dots appeared immediately. Then, asterisk that's not like her. Police just called me. Said someone reported concerns about her mental state. What's going on, asterisk. Fuck. The police had called her parents. I hadn't actually thought through that particular domino, had just assumed they'd file their report and move on to the next call. But of course they'd notify the family if they thought there was a potential mental health crisis. And Jessica had basically handed them a template for that conclusion the moment she called them, crying and incoherent about discovering her boyfriend in bed with another woman. I called Jessica. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I texted her, asterisk Jessica, please respond. Your mom is worried, asterisk. No response. My hands were starting to shake. This was spiraling in a direction I hadn't anticipated, which seemed to be the theme of the entire evening. I'd been so focused on orchestrating the moment of discovery that I hadn't actually thought about what came after, what she would do, how she would react beyond the immediate shock and anger I predicted. I called her again. Stop calling me, she answered on the fourth ring, her voice raw and hollow in a way that made my chest tighten despite everything. Your mom is trying to reach you. The police called her. Good, Jessica said. Let her worry. Let everyone worry. Maybe then people will understand that I'm not crazy. I'm not paranoid. I saw it with my own eyes. Jess. Don't call me that. You don't get to diminish what you did with a nickname. She took a shaky breath. 2 years. 2 years I spent trying to make this work. Trying to ignore the signs. Trying to believe you when you said nothing was happening. And then I finally have proof and you're going to act like I'm the problem. Like I'm the unstable one. I know how it looks, I started. Do you? Her laugh was bitter and broken. Do you really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you let me catch you because you wanted me to understand how it felt. You wanted me to suffer. You orchestrated this entire thing to make me feel crazy, and now that it's worked, now that I'm completely falling apart, you're calling my mother to convince everyone I'm unstable. That's not what? She was crying now, the words coming faster. That's not what you intended. Well, congratulations, David, you succeeded anyway. You wanted me to catch you, and I did. You wanted me to feel the pain I've been afraid of for months, and I do. You wanted to prove that I was paranoid and controlling and unhinged, and congratulations, I am now. Are you happy? No, I said. No, I'm not happy. I never wanted. You wanted this exact thing. You and Sarah, working together to set this up. How long were you planning it? How long did you two laugh about how easy it would be to fool me? I didn't answer because what could I possibly say? Yes, we'd planned it. Yes, we'd executed it carefully. Yes, we'd done it with the intention of giving her exactly what she'd been accusing me of, and now the irony was so sharp it felt like swallowing glass. Where are you right now? I asked instead. Why? So you can call the police again. So you can tell them I'm missing and reinforce the narrative that I'm unhinged. I didn't call the police. You called them. Because I needed help. She was shouting now, the words overlapping with sobs. I needed someone to validate that what I saw was real, that I wasn't imagining things, and now I'm the crazy girlfriend and you're the victim of her paranoia, except I wasn't paranoid. You were in bed with her. I saw it. I have proof that I was right about something, and somehow that's worse, because it means everything else I've been feeling for the past 2 months was justified and now I'm completely losing it. Jess, please. Come back. We need to talk about this properly. There's nothing to talk about. I'm done. I'm done with you, I'm done with this relationship, I'm done trying to convince myself that my instincts were wrong when apparently they were right the entire time. Okay, I said carefully. I understand. But please answer your mom's calls. Let her know you're safe. She hung up. I tried calling back but she turned her phone off. I texted her mom, asterisk she's okay. She's just upset. I think she needs some space tonight, asterisk. The response came back, asterisk what happened between you two? She sounded hysterical on the phone earlier, asterisk. How was I supposed to explain this? How could I possibly capture the last 2 months in a text message to her mother in a way that would make sense? And more importantly, what explanation could I possibly give that wouldn't make me sound like a monster? I typed, asterisk we've been having some problems. I think it would be best if she talked to you directly about what happened, asterisk. Because that's what it came down to now. I had no credibility left. Anything I said would be filtered through the lens of what Jessica had seen, or rather, what she thought she'd seen, and there was no version of events I could present that wouldn't sound like I was trying to manipulate the narrative. I opened my laptop. The video file was still there, untouched. 3 minutes and 47 seconds of staged intimacy designed to prove a point I no longer wanted to make. I hovered my cursor over it, considering deletion, but then stopped. Because deleting it now wouldn't change anything. The damage was already done. Jessica had her proof. The police had made their report. Her mother was worried. And I was sitting alone in my apartment, realizing too late that there were some lines you couldn't uncross, some damage you couldn't undo, and some victories that were indistinguishable from total defeat. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mrs. Martinez, asterisk I'm coming over. I need to understand what's happening with my daughter, asterisk. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything I could possibly say that would help. Hashtag chunk 8. Mrs. Martinez arrived 40 minutes later, her face a mixture of concern and barely concealed anger. She didn't wait for me to open the door fully before stepping inside, her eyes scanning my apartment like she was looking for evidence of depravity. Where is she? She demanded. I don't know, I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said to anyone in days. She won't answer her phone. Your girlfriend accused you of cheating and then disappeared, and you're just sitting here. She pulled out her own phone. I'm calling the police back. If she's not safe. She's safe, I said. She just needs space. She's probably at a friend's house or you traumatized her so severely she's having a mental breakdown. Mrs. Martinez's voice was sharp, cutting. My daughter has anxiety. She's struggled with it for years. And from what she told me on the phone, you orchestrated an entire situation to make her feel crazy. There it was. The moment where I had to decide, continue with the lie, or tell the truth and face the consequences of what I'd actually done. You're right, I said. Mrs. Martinez stopped mid-dial. Excuse me. You're right. I did. I set it up. I asked my study partner Sarah to help me stage a situation where Jessica would catch us together because I was tired of being accused of cheating when I hadn't done anything wrong. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to have evidence of something that didn't actually happen. I wanted to prove that she was being irrational and paranoid. I sat down on the couch. And I did it perfectly. Except now she's not paranoid. Now she's actually broken. The words hung in the air between us. Mrs. Martinez stared at me for a long moment, her expression shifting through several iterations of disbelief. You staged infidelity, she said slowly, to prove a point about her being paranoid. Yes. And now she's having a mental health crisis. Yes. You're either the most stupid person I've ever met, or you're genuinely cruel. She sat down across from me, not bothering to take off her coat. Which is it? I didn't have an answer that would sound like anything other than an excuse. I was angry, I tried. 2 months of constant accusations, constant invasions of privacy, her tracking my location, showing up at places I was supposed to be. She made my life miserable and I wanted her to feel what that was like. I didn't think beyond the moment of discovery. Obviously you didn't, Mrs. Martinez said coldly. Because if you had, you might have realized that deliberately triggering someone with an anxiety disorder by confirming their worst fears is abuse, regardless of whether those fears were rational to begin with. The word hung there like an indictment. Abuse. I told myself I was giving her a taste of her own paranoia, a mirror to reflect back her irrationality. But Mrs. Martinez was right. What I'd done was deliberately weaponize someone's mental health against them. I need to find her, Mrs. Martinez said, standing up. And you need to think very carefully about whether you want to be in this young woman's life at all, because right now, you're the source of her trauma. I have a video, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. A recording of the staged scenario. It proves that nothing actually happened, that it was all orchestrated. Oh, that's perfect, Mrs. Martinez said, her voice dripping with contempt. You have a sex tape of yourself with another woman, which you filmed without her consent apparently, and you think that's going to make this better? You think showing my daughter proof that you were deliberately cruel to her is somehow a redemption arc? No, I started. No, she agreed. You're right. You don't get it. Maybe you need to sit with that for a while. She left without another word. I sat alone in my apartment as the reality of what I'd done settled over me like sediment. The video file on my laptop suddenly felt toxic, a monument to my own cruelty. I opened it, considered the footage of myself and Sarah in bed, fully clothed but positioned to look incriminating, her face carefully out of frame, the whole thing a performance art piece about betrayal and lies. Then I deleted it. Not because it would undo anything. Not because it would help Jessica feel better. But because keeping it felt like honoring the worst version of myself. It took 3 days for Jessica to contact me again. She texted from her mother's number, * we need to talk. My therapist thinks we should do it together, *. The session happened in a neutral office space, Jessica and I sitting on opposite ends of a couch while a woman named Dr. Reeves took notes. Jessica looked hollowed out, like the events of the past week had scooped something essential out of her from the inside. I want him to explain, Jessica said, not looking at me. I want to understand how he thought this was acceptable. I don't have an explanation that makes it okay, I said carefully. Because there isn't one. I was frustrated and angry and I wanted to prove a point, and I did it in a way that was deliberately harmful. I used your mental health against you. And that was wrong. It was abusive, Dr. Reeves said gently, to both of us. I want to be clear about that. Whether or not your concerns about the relationship were justified, David, deliberately triggering someone's anxiety disorder as a form of punishment is abuse. Jessica started crying quietly. Not the raw, broken crying from before. Something more controlled, like she was crying on purpose, getting the grief out in measured doses. I've been thinking about what you said, she told me, finally looking at me. About feeling like you were being punished for something you didn't do. And you were. I was paranoid. I made your life difficult because of my anxiety, and that wasn't fair to you. But 2 wrongs didn't make a right. No, I agreed. They didn't. I can't be in this relationship, she said. Not because of what happened, but because of how it happened. Because you thought the solution to my mental health crisis was to create a bigger mental health crisis. That tells me something fundamental about how you see me. I nodded. Because she was right. I think we both need to work on some things, Dr. Reeves said. Separately. That was the end of it. Not a dramatic revelation or a cathartic moment. Just a quiet ending to something that had been broken long before I'd staged that final scene. As I left the office, I felt the weight of what I'd done settle into a permanent place in my chest. The video was gone, but the damage remained. And unlike the elaborate revenge I'd orchestrated, there was no performance to this consequence. No audience. No vindication. Just the simple understanding that sometimes the worst punishment isn't what happens to you, it's what you do to someone else and have to live with afterward. I'd wanted to be the victim of her paranoia. Instead, I'd become exactly what she'd accused me of being, someone who couldn't be trusted. And that was something I actually deserved.